Hello, friends and colleagues. I am Mari Osawa from Japan, a professor emeritus of the University of Tokyo. This paper is a revised version of a presentation made on last September the 3rd at the international conference held by the Science Council of Japan, Japan's National Academy. Let me share the presentation material with you. I would like to talk about amid COVID-19 societies rather than post, since I don't think any post-phase come quickly and easily. First of all, what is global inclusion? It is defined as below ecological ceiling for the Earth system, and at the same time above social foundation for human beings. The chart is borrowed from a book by Dr. Kate Raworth, which is interestingly titled Donut Economics. The book has much influenced the drafting of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. This slide shows the Japan's distance from achieving 97 SDG targets. At the focal points of my talk, poverty, SDG 1, and gender equality, SDG 5, you see that Japan has clearly a long way to go. Next slide is about average performance by SDG for the US, China, and India, focusing on SDG 1. Red circle means a major challenge, such as poverty headcount at US dollar 3.2 per day in India, and poverty rate after taxes and transfers in the United States. And arrows mean worsening or stagnating or improving. By the way, what are the targets of SDG 1? Goal 1, poverty eradication, is stated as the greatest global challenge. Target 1.1, eradication of extreme poverty. 1.2, at least halving poverty rate in national definition. 1.5, building resilience of the poor and the vulnerable to economic, social, and environmental shocks and disasters. Target 1.b states the sound policy for poverty eradication should be based on pro-poor and gender-sensitive strategies. And who are the poor, and where are they? As for extreme poverty, target 1.1, there are more than 700 million people are in extreme poverty, and majority of them live in sub-Saharan Africa. Poverty rates are high in small, fragile, and conflict-affected countries. Among aged 25 to 34, 122 women for every 100 men. 1 out of 5 children live in extreme poverty. Some more facts about absolute global poverty. According to a book written by Sumner, absolute poverty is defined as living on less than purchasing power parity US dollar 2.5 per day, or defined by multi-dimensional poverty and index, including education, health, and living standard. In 2012, 1.45 billion people are in absolute poverty, and 70% of them live in middle-income countries mix. 150 million in China and 480 million in India, and 25% or less in low-income countries. Substantial economic growth of new mix since the end of the Cold War has not reduced poverty due to widened inequality in those countries. The point is, reducing absolute poverty is affordable for many mix, but only through inclusive growth with redistributive social policies and appropriate development aids, including concessional loans and so on. How affordable? I will talk in slide 14. Before thinking about poverty, however, please note that from the point of view got through the current year's pandemic, the third goal of SDGs, health, and its targets are listed in the slide, are weak on emerging infectious diseases. It's told that epidemics should be ended, but focus is certainly not on emerging communicable diseases in so-called developed countries. And to think back, target 1.5, resilience building to shocks and disasters. Let me here refer to the disaster pressure and release model, which was recognized and embodied in the Hyogo Framework of Action at the Second World Conference on Disaster Reduction in 2005. Para 3 of the framework says, disaster risk arises when hazards, including pathogens, interact with physical, social, economic, and environmental vulnerabilities. Poverty and gender disparity are crucial as root causes of such vulnerabilities. I would like to argue, from a perspective of gender analysis of social policies, that SDG 1 is more indivisibly connected with SDG 3, health, and SDG 5, gender equality, than the SDGs document suggests. According to an article of Neumeier and Klumper, which is so far the standard analysis on the issue, natural disasters are not egalitarian in terms of gender, class, and other social attributes. Disasters kill more women than men, or kill women at an earlier age than men. The stronger the disaster, the stronger this effect on the gender gap in life expectancy, and the higher women's socioeconomic status, the weaker this effect on this gender gap. As for women's status, their article analysis was based on Human Rights Database, CDDB, which is, again, based on U.S. State Department country reports on human rights practices. In CDDB, Japan's scores are 1 for both economic rights and social rights in most years, while G4 countries and Italy have at least 2 and frequently score 3. This slide shows Series 2014 Women's Rights in Law as well as in Practice, which are coded from 0 to 3. Upper half is economic right, and the lower half shows social rights. Now, more recently, political scientist Daniel Aldrich clarified correlation between social capital and disaster resilience. Social trust is recognized as a key indicator of social capital. Now, let me examine situations about SDG Target 1.2, poverty rates in national definition. Figure 1 shows that Japanese working single mothers are the poorest in the OECD countries plus India and China. And the second earner can't reduce poverty risk in Japan. In the US, poverty rates of jobless mothers and jobless fathers are much higher than in India and China. Figure 2 shows that social trust, which is a key indicator of social capital and disaster resilience, is low in countries with high poverty rates such as Japan and the US. Figure 3 shows how affordable poverty reduction is for some poverty-prone countries like the US, India, China, and Japan, if those countries strengthen their tax efforts. Figure 4 shows among low tax effort countries, individual income taxation, which has progressivity, is very weak in Japan, while in the US, corporate income taxation is weak. Figure 5 shows that in Japan, income redistribution by the government exacerbates poverty for households with all adults working, such as two-earner couples, single working persons, including single mothers. Households with all adults working, in other words, work-rich households, income redistribution by the government exacerbates poverty for those households. While for one-earner couples, poverty is reduced, though slightly, by government's income redistribution. Now you see that Japan's welfare state in the aspect of poverty reduction through the income redistribution by the government is dysfunctioning or even reverse functioning. Then, what happened in its health aspect, particularly in preparedness for communicable diseases, CD? Figure 6 shows that national total number of beds in hospitals for CD was drastically reduced in 1999 and have been stagnating. Figure 7 shows national total number of staff of local public health institutes, all staff and medical technologists in particular. This explains why number of COVID tests per 1 million population in Japan is so low, so small. The world ranking is the 151st recently. These are the consequences of retrenchment of welfare states in local public services under financial pressure since the turn of the century. Finally, as for recession, COVID-induced recession has been dubbed as recession by a Canadian economist, a woman. Figures 8 and 9 show that losses of jobs and earnings are greater for women. In April and May, women non-regular workers drastically lost their jobs, while increased jobs since July were mostly for low-paid non-regular workers, women as well as men. However, suicides have been increasing since July in Japan, and they took much more lives than COVID, over 7 times until the end of November. That's it. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much for your attention.